Collins was a young man who had his whole life ahead of him. He was but 20-something years old, and the woman who he was to marry, Josette, would be soon arriving at Collinsport. His love had been at sea for several weeks now, and he was sure that she was going to be arriving shortly. As he climbed the stairs to the new house that they were building, he looked down into the valley. There was the old house where he had been born and raised. He had been happy there, but now there was to be a new home for the family. His father Joshua had given him and Josette the old house as a wedding present, and the workers were hard at work putting on the finishing touches at the new house. The old house was not that small, for it had 4 bedrooms, an inside kitchen, a dining room and a parlor. But for a family with the type of means that the Collins had, it just was no longer large enough. Collinsport was a growing community, and when they had guests the house became quite crowded. He came from a large family with lots of money, and it was said that his great-grandfather Isaac Collins had founded Collinsport. The man had died before Barnabus had been born, but his father had known him as a child. As he entered the grand entryway, Barnabus was met by several of the workers who were busy trying to get the house ready. As you walked in, there was a grand room that was to be the drawing room. There his father would make many business decisions, and the family would have gatherings. To the right would be a large room where they would hold balls and parties. The ceilings were very tall, and the woodwork was all handcrafted. The home was a showplace, and it was hoped that it would stand for the next 200 years. The staircase was a grand staircase that went up to the bedrooms and to the servants' quarters. This home was to have 2 separate wings, with a place to add more if needed at some point. Barnabus could not see the need for so many rooms, and had been glad when he was offered the old house, as the other home was being called. There was to be a master bedroom and 3 other bedrooms on the 2nd floor where you could watch the sea from them. There was a balcony off of each of these rooms for that purpose. That had been Barnabas's mother's idea. Naomi had some good ideas for the new house, and her husband, Barnabas's father, had done the best to make sure that her every wish was granted. His father was busy in the upstairs telling one of the worker how he wanted one of the rooms done. Each room was to have a working fireplace, as the weather could get quite cold in Maine. The rooms were large, and there were pegs in each closet for the hanging of the clothes. Most people only had a few changes of clothes, but the Collins family was not a normal everyday family, and the women especially liked to change their clothes almost every day. What a waste of time, Barnabus had thought to himself. In the upstairs his mother had requested that there be built a separate room where she could bathe. His father had gone all the way to France to get a type of bath that she could use. Because there was no way to bring the water up the stairs. The water would have to be hand-carried and then emptied by hand. But his mother had wanted it, and she was going to get what she wanted in this new home. But Barnabus was a man of power, and he was set to inherit the money that came with the family. His mother was a gentle soul, and he loved her very much. Naomi Collins had done her best to raise Barnabus to be a gentleman and never look down on the people of the town. "They are our friends, Barnabus, and in times of need you will be glad that you remain their friends," she had told him many times. As Barnabus walked down the walkway to the old house, he came upon his younger sister Sarah. Sarah was the light of his and everyone's life at Collinwood. She was always laughing and playing. "Barnabus, do you think that your Josette will come today?" she asked him. "The ship that she will arrive in is due at any time, and yes, I hope she does. Can I please go with you to meet her?" she begged him. "She and her maid will have a lot of things to carry, and we do not want to tire the horses too much, do we? But I promise when I bring my Josette to meet everyone you will be the first to see her if I can manage that," he told her with a smile. Sarah would have liked to go with him to the ship, but he was right. She would very tired. She smiled at her big brother and smiled all right, and then she ran towards the new house. The ride to Collinsport from Martinique was long and boring. Josette had been on the ship for over 3 weeks and was beginning to get bored to death. The smell of the men and the sweat was remarkable. She thought that they must never take baths. How ironic that they live on the water. She had brought with her a manservant named Angelique. Angelique was a pretty woman with blonde hair and blue eyes. She would do well in the new world. Josette called to her and asked for another blanket as she was cold. The man from the ship came to Josette's cabin and told her that land was in sight. They would be soon landing in Collinsport and she would be meeting the man who she had planned on marrying. "Quick, Angelique, I must look my best for Barnabas." As Angelique got Josette ready for the meeting of her fiancé, she thought evilly. "This is a wedding that will never take place, for Barnabas is to be my husband and not this woman's. I will do everything in my power to make sure that Barnabas is mine." She thought of the many things that she had learned as a witch and she knew that she could keep him. Barnabas had just returned to the old house when the word came that the ship carrying his beloved would be landing at port within the hour. He looked in the mirror and made sure that he was presentable and went downstairs. There in the parlor sat his mother. She smiled at him and told him, "You have a face that will melt the heart of that lovely woman who you will soon marry. Go to her and treat her well." With that, Barnabas gave her a kiss and headed out to the pier. Whenever a large ship arrived in port, there were many people who would greet it. Some were there to help with the unloading of the merchandise, but many were just there out of plain curiosity. Today was a new thing totally. For the man that they knew as Barnabas Collins was to meet the woman to whom he was going to marry, Josette. There were many people waiting at the pier, all straining their eyes to get a first glimpse of this woman. But the woman that caught most of their eyes was not Josette, it was the beautiful witch Angelique. She had already started to put a spell on the people of Collinsport. As the ship came into view, Barnabas did his best to see Josette, but could not find her. As the ship was docked, he watched for his beloved and then he saw her. She was walking with another lady, Angelique. Angelique, why would the one woman who he had cheated on Josette with come to Collinsport? He worried to himself. But he smiled at Josette and took some of her bags and loaded them onto the carriage.